on this edition of Insights on PBS Hawai'i. Following the recent death of Daniel Inouye, Hawaii suffered a tremendous loss of seniority in the U.S. Senate. How will this impact our federal fortunes? How can we rebuild the power and influence our senior senator delivered for so many decades? Now, live in our studio, our host, Dan Boylan.
Aloha, and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawai'i. I'm Dan Boylan. For as long as most of us can remember, Hawaii enjoyed influence in Congress out of proportion to the size of our state, thanks in large part to the work of Senator Daniel Inouye. Despite his advancing age, Inouye kept right on going. Somehow it seemed he'd always be there, advocating for our needs and directing federal dollars our way. But without much warning, Senator Inouye's life came to an end a week before Christmas. At the same time, our junior senator, Daniel Inouye, was retiring. That set off a holiday season scramble to recalibrate our congressional delegation before the new session started last week. Overnight, we went from one of the most senior teams in the Senate to one of the most junior, with Mazie Hirono moving up from the House and former Lieutenant Governor Brian Schatz brand new to Capitol Hill. On the House side, young Representative-elect Tulsi Gabbard joins Colleen Hanabusa, who is just beginning her second term. Washington may seem remote, but the decisions made there affect our lives in endless ways. So we hope to hear your questions and concerns tonight. What do you think of Governor Abercrombie's appointment of Brian Schatz as our senior senator? What can our representatives do to build their stature in Washington very quickly? Do you think seniority matters anymore in our ideologically polarized Congress? And what happens up there, what will it mean here at home? You can join our conversation by calling, emailing, or tweeting your questions and comments. The contact information you now see on your screen will be repeated throughout the program. Insights is also available live on your computer screen at pbshawaii.org. As always, the video will also be posted online after tonight's program. Now let's welcome our guests. Blake Oshiro is Governor Abercrombie's Deputy Chief of Staff. Prior to joining the executive office, Blake was Majority Leader in the State House, where he served for 11 years, representing the Aiea and Halawa areas. Blake is an attorney by trade. He was also an applicant for the Senate seat that went to Brian Schatz. Ed Case spent more than 4 years in the U.S. House of Representatives after winning a special election for Patsy Mink's seat in 2002. He gave up that seat to challenge Senator Daniel Inouye in 2006. Ed previously represented Manoa in the State House from 1994 to 2002. Early in his career, Ed worked on Capitol Hill for Hawaii Senator Spark Matsunaga. He is currently an attorney in private practice, and he also submitted his name for Inouye's seat. Erin Ling Johansson is leader of the Republican minority in the State House and represents the area from Moanalua to Pearl Ridge. Erin has spent time in both state and federal government. In Washington, D.C., he worked in the White House Office of Presidential Personnel and also served as Deputy Chief of Staff of the U.S. Mint. Here in Hawaii, he was Deputy Chief of Staff for Lieutenant Governor Duke Aiona and legislative analyst in the State House. He earlier worked at Yale University, from which he also graduated. And Neil Milner is Emeritus Professor of Political Science at the University of Hawaii, where he taught for nearly 4 decades. He continues to offer political analysis as a media consultant and recently covered the November election for KITV. He did not apply for the office of United States Senate with the death of Senator Inouye. You didn't, did you, Neil?
No, although thousands of people asked me to, I turned it down.
I'm sure that they did. Yes. Ed, 6 years ago, you ran for the Senate, and you predicted something like this might happen, that it was necessary to start building up some seniority with a new member, and you based part of your campaign on that. A lot of people have said since the death of Senator Inouye, Ed warned us. Ed Case warned us. You warned us about that. What does the loss of seniority, all of this seniority at this point, mean in your mind?
Well, it means a tremendous disadvantage to Hawaii on Capitol Hill. We went from 78 years of seniority in the House and the Senate to 2 years of seniority. That's probably the biggest swing in the history of our country. So that makes a huge difference, and it makes a huge difference to a small state like Hawaii. A big state like California or New York or Texas can absorb these swings in seniority a little bit better than a small state. When you take that kind of a hit, you're basically starting from scratch across the board.
Because you're saying there's more variety in the length of service that people have had in either the Senate or the House.
Exactly. But, you know, obviously 2 senators per state. You never want to be stuck with 2 senators starting it from scratch, which is what we have right now. Other states have gone through that, and they are suffering still for it. I don't want to overemphasize it, though, because what matters on Capitol Hill is seniority and experience and ability. And so, you know, seniority helps a great deal. The reason Senator Inouye was such a great senator was he had it all. So it's not as if, you know, the sky is going to fall. And I think we have to take this in perspective. The reality is somewhere between nothing's wrong and the sky is falling. And we have to try to find the way with the delegation that we have now.
But if I'm not mistaken, the finance director of the state, or budget director of the state, has said that we have to worry less about a fiscal cliff in Hawaii and more about an Inouye cliff. Do you go along with that?
Well, I think what Calbert Young is saying is that the long-term effects that we will see from the loss of Senator Inouye is really something that will be very, very hard for us to predict. And so while the fiscal cliff was something that we could see coming and possibly we could adjust for, with Senator Inouye it'll be very, very difficult because he was so integrated in terms of the military spending that happened, whether people liked the pork barreling that went on and specific projects. A lot of that will also be falling off and not there anymore. And so that is really what we're talking about, is those long-term effects and what will be the effect on the state.
Aaron, I've heard a lot of Republicans argue that Inouye's importance was overstated, that the military is always going to be supported here no matter who's in office, that the military spending is going to come here. Where's the Republican critique here? Do you think that's a fair critique?
Well, I think if I look at it from my perspective, having served in the executive branch in Washington, D.C., I saw firsthand just how much influence Senator Inouye had. And people don't understand sometimes that, you know, whether it's a senator supporting a nomination or a senator opposing it, that can make or break who is running a federal agency, you know, with billions of dollars at its discretion and thousands of people under its purview. And Senator Inouye was one of those people that I have to say, when we were working in the White House, you know, you don't necessarily bat an eyelash at every single one of 435 members of Congress in the House of Representatives, and not even with all 100 senators. But he was one of those people who was so universally respected and held in such high admiration that I think, irrespective of what administration was in the White House or whether you were working in executive branch, when you got an inquiry from Senator Inouye's office or you got a letter of support for a particular candidate for an appointment, it had extra special clout. So I mean, I think we've talked at this point about some of the very definitive things that are tied to him, but I think what I got to see firsthand in Washington, D.C. is there are more subtle, nuanced things that we won't know until it's sort of gone, that, you know, why is so-and-so not appointed to this, and why not here?
Neil, do you agree that he was this important? I mean, some people have said that we treated his death a bit as though we were seeing a monarch die. I mean, his ashes were carried to all of the islands. He was in the Capitol Rotunda. People came to see him at the Capitol. Did we overdo all this? Is this overstated?
I don't think we overdid it, because he was, at least in one sense, he was so important politically and so important symbolically. He manifests the history of progressive politics in Hawaii. He was there at the beginning, right after World War II. He was there at every stage. I think that we have to be careful about what I call the process of grief. I've actually done some writing about this for Honolulu Magazine. There was a sense afterwards that you couldn't even raise the issue of his impact because it was not possible to calculate it. And I think in that sense, his impact can be overrated. You don't want that to happen. You don't want it to say that it's impossible to calculate his impact, therefore his impact is going to be just so universally negative by him being gone. And so what you really want to do is to say he deserved all of the respect he got. We're in an uncertain world, but we have to begin to look at the things that I think this panel has already implied that are going to happen along the way. I personally don't think that the Inouye fiscal cliff is anywhere near as bad as the long-term fiscal cliff is going to be in this country, where even if that senator were alive 5 to 10 years from now, if we don't work out the revenue demand issue, especially on health care, there isn't anything that the most earmark-oriented, influential senator was going to be able to do to have a state or a country that is financially sound.
Ed, you nod.
I agree exactly with what Neil just said. I think there's two issues for Hawaii. The first is the financial health and prosperity of this country, which is going to impact Hawaii as it will every other state. And we've got major issues to deal with, and we need our representatives and senators to pitch in on solving those problems, just as every single other one of the members of Congress need to do that, as well as everybody else in the country. So that's one issue, and that is going to impact us, and it's already started to impact us, because let's remember that even in the years before Senator Inouye passed away, we had dried up earmarks. So that was starting to dry up, partially as a result of the fiscal crisis of our country. But number two, which is I think where most of the discussion has occurred, is in the impact of Senator Inouye to channel, deliver, earmark, however you want to call it, federal dollars to Hawaii, to specific parts of Hawaii. That's what the budget director is really discussing, is what impact is it going to be because of Senator Inouye's passing and the loss of seniority on specific programs, specific areas of Hawaii's economic health? And that's really the question for the state.
Are we talking about things like completion of the Saddle Road or continued support for the East-West Center, or?
Well, we're talking about those issues, but we're talking about a little bit more of a macro thing. We're talking about, are we going to continue to see, for example, the same level of support for the military in Hawaii, which is 25% of our economy? Are we going to continue to see the same support for Native Hawaiian programs, which is a big chunk of the aid that goes to Native Hawaiian community? Are we going to continue to see it for healthcare, education? You can talk about specific projects, and those are illustrative, but not exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, Ed is completely right. I mean, when you look at the state budget and the amount of money that we actually expend in federal funds, it's about $2 billion, which is about almost a fifth of what we're talking about just in terms of state government running and the programs that it needs to do to cover all those things that Ed had mentioned. And so ultimately, the question will be, as he said, on the larger macro level is what's going on with the federal government. But when you don't have that seniority, when you don't have that advocate like Senator Inouye who had the ability to funnel certain funds or make sure that certain programs got taken care of, that to us is the bigger concern.
I was reading the Insights section where each one of our delegations wrote about what they had planned in Washington. They all talked about teamwork and working together. I spent a little time in Washington. I've heard members of the delegation sometimes talk about each other, and they don't always get along as well as we act when they're talking about teamwork. Am I saying something out of school here, Ed, or is that true?
Dan, you always say something out of school. Hey, this is supposed to be an out-of-school kind of program.
All right,
so.
well, tell me. That's,
You're not just a pretty face.
Here's the reality, and I've watched and worked in the congressional delegation in Washington since the 1970s, and so I've seen a lot of pairings, and I've been a part of a lot of pairings. My general observation is that there have been individual frictions between members within the delegation, going to political ambitions, going to grudges that happened in the 40s, but it has never gotten in the way of the delegation working together as a team. I've hardly ever seen that. You can count on one hand the number of times where the delegation is completely divided on a particular issue and doesn't kind of come together and put all that aside and try to work together. And in that way, I think that our delegation has been very lucky over many decades now. I hope and believe that the delegation that we have there now is going to continue that tradition.
One of the arguments that I think was used, now you were there. One of the arguments I think that was used in deciding to appoint the lieutenant governor to the Senate seat rather than heed Inouye's wishes and appoint Colleen Hanabusa was that that would then mean a race in the 1st District again, a special election, a likelihood of several Democrats getting into it, and a Republican would win. What's wrong with a delegation of 4 not having at least one member who is a Republican? Why would that possibly be put into the calculus? I want your response to that, Johansson, not his.
Well, I'm all for diversity. Certainly, I think the 7 members of my caucus add something to the House of Representatives. But I think within the 51 members, there's a lot of different opinions and perspectives, and I think that's honestly quite healthy. If people are committed to working collaboratively and focused on serving the people and serving Hawaii, I think it can be done with a mixed delegation. I certainly understand from Democratic politics that's not the optimum, but I think what people are clamoring for both nationally and here is for folks to pursue a common sense agenda and just operate in a common sense way and to get along and actually get something done for the people.
Bipartisanship.
But there's nothing wrong with it. But I'll ask you this: would you vote for a candidate just because it would create a bipartisan delegation? You're a fairly liberal guy. Would you vote for, say, Charles Dejoux so that because diversity is good? That's where the diversity argument or the bipartisan argument always falls down. People like the principle, but they're not, particularly if they're engaged in politics, they're not going to be the ones that are going to vote for a candidate from the opposite party just for the principle of having a mixed delegation. It's always a good argument that a minority party makes, and I'm sensitive to the argument, but you just don't make decisions that way.
Are you asking me to answer your question?
Yes, I'm asking.
I voted for Republicans many times.
Well, if I could interject just real quick, because I think that's an important point, and it cannot be lost that anyone in Hawaii who's going to run as a Republican must be a compelling candidate in and of themselves with broad appeal. I don't think merely running just for the sake of being a Republican and being different is going to get people elected. But I do think you have to be compelling, and then I think you do add something if you're that kind of compelling candidate.
But can I clarify part of your premise is that I don't think that whether there was going to be a special election and who would have won the special election was the deciding factor for the governor. The governor actually looked at the issues of seniority, as Ed had mentioned. He looked at who he thought ultimately would be able to best continue on, especially with the values that the two of them hold together. And he has a great partnership with then Lieutenant Governor Schatz. And so that was in large part why he made that selection. I think the special election was a consideration. I'm not going to say it wasn't, but I don't think that was by any means the deciding factor.
You think it primarily had to do with seniority?
I think that was a big factor.
And that would fit your, you would go, that's a decent reason to make a decision.
I think it's a plausible, defensible reason to put a U.S. Senator in place. So I agree with what Blake just said. I think the special election was a little bit more of a consideration than frankly Blake is letting on. And I think the prevailing wisdom was that, and I believe that if there had been a special election in the first Congressional, you would have had probably Mr. Dejoux returning to Washington. So that had to have entered into things, as well as the cost of. But the prevailing reason, as Blake said, was exactly what the governor said, and I think it was a good reason.
What does this do? I mean, right now your 7 members are joining Joe Souki, apparently, in the House of Representatives to take over, and you will have some influence in the reorganization of the House, which leaves Calvin Say and a bunch of other guys with it. They will become the dissidents, right? They will become the dissidents. Then there are the people who did not get and I don't mean anyone at this table, but I mean certainly Colleen Hanabusa may have some desire to want to run for either governor against Abercrombie 2 years from now, or run for the Senate seat to which Brian was appointed. So sort of the old Inouye and union folks against Abercrombie, who's been having some trouble with the unions. There's splits all over the place. I mean, our politics are split from one end to the other. Polarization all our own over who the kingmakers are. Fair description?
Yes.
Yep. Come on.
I think, look, I think that it certainly is that at this given moment, but the power of party identification and the strength of party unity, good, bad, whatever, is going to step in and is going to make a lot of difference. If you start thinking about who may have designs on running for various offices, and Colleen Hanabusa comes up, maybe because she's angry, maybe because the governor's not doing such a good job, you need a couple of things to make that happen. First of all, you need the wherewithal to carry out a campaign, and you need a way to distinguish yourself from another Democratic candidate in a primary in a way that you can win. And there's not a good history of that there, as Ed can attest for himself. So I don't deny that right at this moment there's a lot of fragmentation. I mean, my God, we just lost the 2 senators. But I don't think that's, I don't think that's going to last. And the problem for the Republicans is that you need a certain critical mass to be able to take advantage of that. And I think that's a real challenge for the Republicans right now. So talk to me 2 years from now, I guess.
Nonetheless, I think the point here is, and Neil said this earlier, and that was that Senator Inouye was such an incredibly commanding political figure in the politics of Hawaii that exerted power and control and influence, and people listened to what he wanted. I can attest to that. And when you lose a person in a center of power, that power is not transferable. That power arose from his experience and ability and seniority in the U.S. Senate. It's not there anymore. There is somewhat of a power void and vacuum, which people are busy trying to fill. So I'm not saying that Hawaii is a completely different place politically, but I think that there are situations that may arise that may surprise us in the next 2, 4, 6 years. Is that fair?
Do you guys agree? Aaron, I want to go back to that problem of a Republican critical mass, because it just seems to me that the Republicans on the mainland are hurting you people in Hawaii terribly. I mean, that the spillover from how far the mainland Republican Party has gone to the right has hurt the Republican Party here in growing your numbers, and you're still at 1 in the Senate and 7 in the House. You lost 1 seat, right, in the House. How do you feel? Am I off base in your mind? Or?
You know, I think Hawaii is definitely a blue state. No two ways about it. And I think while there's definitely, each of us have certain baggage imputed onto us, both because of local history and also because of national political trends, I think you as an individual candidate have to be compelling at the door, and you have to be able to explain to people how you are different or how you are the same. And I think where I'm not quite sure exactly when I look at my own caucus how much of a disadvantage it's been, even though the caucus is 1 smaller, the composition of the caucus has dramatically changed. 4 out of the 7 people are age 32 or younger, and you have a lot of different experiences, from people who are farmers to another member who grew up in the Kingdom of Tonga. This is not exactly the Republican Party that people think of when they think of 1954, when there was the Democratic Revolution. So I think if Republicans in Hawaii can continue to make an argument based largely on, my governance model is pragmatism, and I think that's a lot of people in Hawaii. They can buy that. There's certainly a lot of Democrats who vote for me, and I'm grateful for that. I wouldn't be here without them. But I think it's, again, comes up to that, you have to be that compelling candidate and go above and beyond that threshold. You can't just show up and send them a few mailers.
And the vibes that are coming out of mainland Republicanism or in the House of Representatives and sort of gridlock, that doesn't hurt you folks here.
I think at some level, all of the gridlock in Washington, D.C. hurts anyone who is elected, because people just want the work of the people done. And I think the common refrain you hear from most folks in the public is, why can't everybody just get along, and why can't they get to work? And I think, so that exists whenever there is a lot of acrimony and polarization in Washington, D.C.
Ed, I believe you said that seniority, experience, ability, all of this went into a good delegation. We have no seniority. There's a mix of experience, one person not very experienced at all, the others experienced in state government, and then ability. You two guys wanted the job. If you had gotten the job, how would you increase this stature after the loss of all this experience?
Well, I think ultimately what it comes down to when it comes to any legislative body is about relationships. And I think you ultimately have to build it. You have to invest the time, you have to invest the energy, and ultimately develop the trust that you need in order to become effective. And so that doesn't happen overnight, especially in any body that big, but you have to work at it. And I think that there are many candidates that had those qualities, and I thought I was one of them.
Why? What would you have done?
Well, first of all, given what Blake just said, I would have appointed him for sure. Look, you got to get in there and do a couple of different things. First of all, you do have to develop relationships, especially in the United States Senate. The U.S. Senate is a very, very personal body. There's 100 people there. You can't go hiding in a caucus of 50 like you can in the 435 members of the House and do whatever the heck you want. You've got to have an individual relationship, number one. Number two, you have to be a leader from the get-go. national issues, and hopefully you'll pick the issues that you're interested in and that are interesting and crucial to your state. And you have to develop those through your committees. And you know, we've had new committee assignments that have come out now, so we're going to be going in a different direction from a delegation. Number three, clearly you've got to take care of the home front, and you've got to get in there and do the heavy lifting in terms of getting the federal dollars, making the federal programs work, and that's just grinding it out inside of the legislature, inside the administration, staying in touch with the state government, staying in touch with the folks back home. And then you just keep doing those things over and over again and build up that experience and seniority that brings you the influence over time.
The scholars, we up here in the scholarly world, we always know how it should be done. Neil, how should it be done?
You want me to answer in Greek or?
Greek would be good.
How should it be done?
And we won't know what you want to say.
I think it should be done the way they said. There's a couple of ways to think about it. One of which is you want to know how to do it, you follow the career of Dan Inouye, not the mythical career at the end when he was so powerful and famous. You look what he did at the beginning. When he was first elected as a representative of the territory, the first thing he did was to seek out as a mentor, his words, the chair and the vice chair of the committee that had jurisdiction over statehood. Then he ends up becoming good friends with Sam Rayburn, who was arguably one of the most powerful politicians at the time, the speaker. And he has these funny stories about Rayburn, but it's clear when he gets elected to the Senate, he makes that kind of contact with Lyndon Johnson. You follow his career from there to what it takes to be a Senate man. He's like a case study of following what a political scientist calls the folkways of the Senate, which was doing what you folks say that it was doing, establishing relationships, keeping a low profile outside of the Senate, but working hard in the Senate, establishing a kind of expertise. That's where the basis of his strength was initially. Seniority came later, but he was already a well-established, respected guy, and I think that's the model that our senators have to follow.
You're nodding.
Well, it's entirely correct. And by the way, we've been lucky in the members of the delegation who have had careers like Senator Inouye. He just was there for a very long time and had very unique abilities. But Spark Matsunaga, the same thing. Patsy Mink, the same thing. Neil Abercrombie, 20 years in the U.S. House, a very good career in the U.S. House that, by the way, most of us don't appreciate in him because he grounded out from the get-go. And Senator Inouye at one time was not on the Appropriations Committee, and then he was a junior member of the Appropriations Committee, and he worked his way back up.
Bernadas from Wahewa just wants you to know, strong supporter of Ed Case, I voted for him.
Thank you so much, Bernadette.
David, from Kailua, with the change in the congressional delegation, how would this affect the Jones Act regarding shipping in Hawaii?
It's not going to affect it at all because the members of the delegation oppose any changes to the Jones Act. So I don't really see any kind of, I hate to say it because I've got a different view of it, but I would hope that there would be a better discussion on it at least. But I don't anticipate, some sea change, so to speak, in the Jones Act.
Comment by Dwight in Hilo. Does the panel realize that Senator Inouye was trying to move military from Japan to Hawaii and Guam, and Native Hawaiians do not want the military here? There have been a couple letters to the editor within the last week, I think, in which people have complained and said, and all this lionization of Senator Inouye, he militarized Hawaii, and we've become too dependent upon the military. Any response to that? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I will say, just in response to that question, I mean, there is that key issue of Okinawa and the Marines that are there and where they're going to go. And I think that's what he's talking about when he says Japan, because ultimately there are plans to move them to Guam and partially to Hawaii. And really, ultimately, we want actually more military to come here. I think we have such an integrated relationship with them that we are really dependent on them as part of our economy. And we want to actually continue to build that relationship. And so I know some people are dissatisfied with that. They have some angst, they have some anger. But for our economy, I believe the governor and our administration is very, very supportive of the military.
Any other?
The military in Hawaii was heavily influenced by Senator Inouye's presence on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, which he was the chair of and which he retained jurisdiction over. So I think this is one of those areas of very specific interest right now as we transition from Senator Inouye, because although Senator Inouye's spin, I guess, when he came back was always that it's here because of me. It's not entirely because of him, yet a lot of it was here because of him. And with the loss of that, I think that we definitely have to track that. And there's an opportunity for people to go to new senators and new representatives now and make their case. So go in and if you feel that way, go in and talk to the new members of your delegation, see if you can change their minds.
And that's why I think it's so critical that we have Mazie Hirono on the Armed Services Committee and Congresswoman Hanabusa continuing to sit on the House Armed Services Committee. I think they will have some degree of influence ultimately in terms of what the military strategy will be for Hawaii and the Pacific.
But the question raises a broader issue, and they do it through Native Hawaiians, and that is this tension between, let's call it progressive politics, and military appropriations and militarization. That's been an issue that the Democratic Party, particularly the progressive side, and Neil Abercrombie was one of those and certainly got criticism from the left over his years in Congress, that have been wrestling for years. Traditionally, the congressional delegation has decided the way Blake just said they did, in the sense of making a choice for the importance of military appropriations here. And that's a choice that's been made. I'm not saying it's a good choice. I'm not saying it's a bad choice. And every once in a while, it flies into the face with some Native Hawaiian opposition, with some opposition to the single nature of the economy here, with some opposition to the whole idea of militarization. But it keeps moving forward. And there doesn't seem to be any likely change in the nature of the economy here that's going to make that go away, not to mention the fact that the nature of foreign policy is not going to change that.
We're talking about a guy who was famous for bringing money to Hawaii, and he took credit for that. But Peter on the North Shore said, wasn't Inouye part of the fiscal cliff problem? He kept going after more and more and more and more federal money. So we all benefit from federal money coming to us, right? But you were saying that we've got to solve the problem of spending too much money and balancing it with it. You've made a career out of arguing that we have to be responsible about expenditures. I mean, you guys are sitting on a state budget that right now looks pretty good, but it's been some real tough times in the past. And you guys, you're all talking about debt in the Republican Party, but you know you don't want too much debt. You don't want too many things cut for here. Aren't we all of us in our own way full of contradictions on this and sort of talking out both sides of our mouths?
Yes, but we have to understand the nature of the contradiction. Part of the issue is this. The whole idea of earmarks is a kind of a phony idea. It's a term that gets used to express things that other people don't like. If you think about earmarks in a more politically realistic way, it's about things that people think they want regardless of the source, whether it's federal or national. And a lot of these things are, we want to do this, where can we get the money? Now, I don't think the earmarks issue is really the big fiscal issue. And I think the big fiscal issue is earmarks, not earmarks. Right. We have an enormous increase in expenses for certain kind of things. Entitlements. And a clear consensus that even goes over to the right that we shouldn't do bad things to Medicare, but yet at the same time, in about 5 or 10 years at this rate, the discretionary spending for things that are not for entitlement are going to be half of what they are now. That's the problem. It's not so that people have to get used to the fact that they're going to have to make some important judgments there. We always want money to do things, and you can't operate politically without them. And it's not earmarks that's doing it. It's the fact that we haven't reconciled what we would like the state to offer us and the kinds of revenues that it would take to make those kinds of offers. And I don't think either party in Washington does a very good job in actually taking this head on.
I think that's also the consummate tension that all elected officials face. Am I a representative for a particular constituency, or do I represent the entire state or the entire nation? And I think a lot of elected officials spend most of their career trying to figure out what is the appropriate balance. And I'm sitting between two people who have far more political experience elected, but that you find wildly different philosophies from it's literally just about my one single constituency to I'm here, a member of the Senate, for the entire United States, and how people reconcile that when they're elected manifests itself in the policies of, I'm getting more appropriations just for my state, or am I focused on the broader picture?
I just want to add one thing, because there's actually I death of a very famous person that speaks to this. James Buchanan, who was a political scientist and an economist, just died. George Mason University. He won a Nobel Prize for economics. He won it mainly because he showed that it's absolutely rational in the democratic political system for a politician, regardless of power, to increase allocations at the time when they're running for elections. And this dynamic is a dynamic that's built into the system. And we now see the manifestation of that. How do you break out of that? How do you finally have situations where people are willing to back away from the desire to keep, the temptation to keep moving forward? And this is not just liberals who do this. Conservatives do it also. If it's built into the way we think about things, it becomes a much more difficult problem to handle.
I don't know why he had to study that. I could have told him.
Yeah, well, I know.
You would add a Nobel Prize?
No, in all seriousness, that is the dilemma that our entire country faces right now. Because, kind of the party's over. We've been living on borrowed money for about 15 years now, hardcore borrowed money. It's in pretty bad shape. It is true that Senator Inouye was a contradiction in that way, but so was every single other member of Congress going back a long time. You know, you always want to write your constituents at the end of the session, where I don't care whether it's the city council, the state legislature, or the U.S. Congress, and tell them what you brought back for them at the end of the day. And you don't want to bring bad news to them. And when you bring bad news, you get nuked. You don't win your next election. You get yelled at in town meetings. So we're talking leadership at this point, which is not occurring in Washington. Aaron made that comment, and I think we all know it. And I think the hope, obviously, here is that enough reality will seep through in the next, hopefully, months, that maybe we can find some solutions. And that's the dilemma that's going to define President Obama's second term, right there. That's going to define his second term. Governor Abercrombie has the same problem, and so does the state legislature. So I'm glad they're in it. And
Governor Abercrombie, I believe, is going to introduce a huge new expenditure, namely preschool for everybody, for every kid, beginning at, what is it, 3 years old? I think
4
it
years
is.
old.
4 years old, beginning in what year?
It's going to be starting in fiscal year 15.
And the budget for it this year will be $25 million, did I read?
That will be in 15. So the
15.
first year will be about $3 million, and the next year will be $25 million.
Have we recovered so well from the recession that we can afford this?
Well, our Council of Revenue projections are very, very healthy. And so based off of that, we are in a positive balance. And let me posit that by saying a lot of that has been by some strong fiscal management over the last 2 years, whereby we came into a deficit situation with our state budget, and we've actually been able to turn it around now. So we're going to be expecting about a $400 million positive balance. Now, that money ultimately is part of what we'd like to use for an early childhood education school readiness program that we believe is ultimately very, very important. And if we're going to have an educational system that really prepares children to enter into the K-12 system. And so it's a 4-year-old program. It's 1 year, and it'll be a public-private partnership trying to work with the existing system and providing subsidies so that people that can't afford to send their 4-year-olds to preschool right now can do so.
When a bill like this comes up, and let's say your name is Aaron Johansson, and you're part of a group that supports Speaker Souki. And Speaker Souki says, well, I'm going to support the governor on this. I'm a Democrat. And you as a Republican are watching this thing come forward, and you're saying, oh, wait a minute, that's the expenditure of an awful lot of money. How are you going to deal with these ambivalent feelings?
Well, you're in luck. My name is Aaron Johansson, and so I can answer your question. But, I think all 51 of us legislators, irrespective of political philosophies, on face are looking at the merits or lack of merits in the bills. Much as we like to talk about unity within a caucus, unity within a party, there are some widely disparate views all across the spectrum, and you can see that manifest in the debate on the House floor. Some of the arguments that my caucus makes typically on the mainland would be made by a different party. And so in assessing whether it's the early learning program creation or the governor's IT initiatives, I think every idea deserves a fair hearing, and that's part of what the committee structure does, is it gives that hearing, and that's a chance to assess, is it a good idea or a bad idea? And there's a lot of pros and cons for everything, and that's part of the beauty of the legislative process.
I've been trying to sort of look at this business with the appointment of Brian and passing over Inouye's choice for the House, and it seems to me that it's got everything to do with the Obama party of 20. What was the year now? I'm off. 2008, that's what it was all about. And Colleen Hanabusa and the senator were with Hillary Clinton, and this is where the big split took place. That would have him turn down the idea of moving Colleen up. And then I got an email the other day that he appointed Weiner as his chief of staff. And by golly, those are the co-founders of the Hawai'i for Obama thing. And of course, the governor claimed that he was changing Obama's diapers practically when he was a kid, when he was a baby. Is there anything to this, do you think?
Well, I think part of it, again, goes back to the ideas of shared values and the partnership that the governor and the lieutenant governor, Schatz, then had for years, for the past 4 years. And so it really, really strengthened itself while they were the governor and lieutenant governor. And so I think that, to me, was a big, big factor, along with, like I said, the seniority, in terms of why he thought Senator Schatz was the choice.
Nobody else wants to touch this.
Oh, well. I think that I take Blake and the governor at their word. I think they chose Brian Schatz for his ability and for his potential and for the time that he can serve in the Senate and build up that experience and seniority and ability, by the way. Of course it had something to do with it, that they had an existing relationship, that they had fought the Obama battle together, that they had been opposed by Senator Inouye, that Senator Inouye, that Governor Abercrombie was not Senator Inouye's choice for governor. I mean, come on, of course that had something to do with it. But it was not the reason. None of this was the reason. The reason.
I believe in black and white.
Yeah.
Black and
okay,
white.
I know.
I like to keep it simple. I'm not like these Manoa guys. I like to keep it simple.
So, I mean, I wasn't inside of Governor Abercrombie's head or inside of his room, but, I worked with the guy for 4 years. I think I know a little bit about him, and I think he made a good, solid choice based on what he thought was good for Hawaii.
Does the panel? Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
You want to.
The governor gets criticized a lot for a lack of leadership or poor leadership. This is an example of really excellent leadership in 2 ways. It involved a multiplicity of values that you had to consider, a multiplicity of facts. You could see that every time you mention one or somebody mentions one, all of us say yes, but there was something else. And it also was not the easy way out. Those 2 things, a decision made on those 2 things, is increasingly rare in national politics.
True.
And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Does the panel think there should be term limits for the House of Representatives and the Senate, so we do not get into the no seniority situation?
Well, as long as I'm not in office, I'm all for term limits.
Which is the standard answer for candidates.
No, I'll answer it with seriousness. I think the term limits are appropriate in the state legislatures. But term limits do hurt a small state in the U.S. Congress.
Because they need, when you have seniority, you're in.
The seniority and ability to serve over time is a great equalizing factor for small states. And Senator Inouye is a perfect example. If we had term limits, we wouldn't have had the benefit of that service. So I'm just less convinced that term limits are the way to go on the U.S. Congress level. But I do think that they could serve very well in the state legislature, as they're already in place for the governor's offices, the mayor's offices, the county council offices.
As a current state legislator and recently a state legislator, what do you think of?
Generally, I am against term limits on any level, except for maybe governor and mayor. Because I think for the legislative body, when you're creating policy, what you really need is some degree of institutional knowledge. I think you need to have seen an issue, seen it evolve, know what the arguments are, because otherwise the people that have the power, especially when you're crafting a budget, will ultimately be the staff and it'll be the lobbyists. And so the only way you can balance that out is having the elected officials with that knowledge and tools that they're built.
I think there's something to be said about institutional knowledge. I think in order to get that, you can make the term limits longer. But I do think that term limits introduce a regular influx of ideas and different people. And what's more, I also think because people realize that they have a limited time to make a difference, they're far more focused on making a difference rather than just longevity of their political career. So I would support term limits.
You can also get at the issue of if what bothers people with term limits is that folks are around too long in the office, it's too simplistic to say, well, just don't vote for them. But what you can do is to make the financial wherewithal that's involved in the in elections, in campaigns, more equal, so that the incumbent, or so that the challenger has a little bit better chance to do it. Now that's getting hard with Citizens United, but that's another way to get at this sort of thing. That if you don't like the person, I really do believe in institutional knowledge, and I do believe this is a job. It's a job you can get voted out of, but it's increasingly harder to get voted out of it. But if you make it a little bit easier to challenge, you might get at the same thing.
In Congress, the staff does a lot of the legwork. Do you think the new members will hire some of the experienced staff of the former senators? I'm sure they're already doing that, wouldn't you guess? Nobody knows.
I would presume they are. I believe they are. And there's some very good staff in Washington that in fact are without jobs now that know a heck of a lot about the system and about Hawaii. So I hope they're picked up.
Senator Inouye not only had seniority, he claimed the most powerful committee in terms of money. And we've been talking about earmarks, or kept talking about what did that do for Hawaii being on appropriations and chairing appropriations. Isn't that sort of orchestrating what each guy's getting for his state on the Appropriations Committee? Indeed, not only that, but the whole Senate.
And what's more, because you're doing that, you're getting a whole lot of clout and respect from your peers because you're determining sometimes their political futures or the fortunes of their state. So it's, besides the actual doling out of money because you have that power, it is an immensely influential position.
Yeah, and even the agencies have to come to you because ultimately the money that they get will go through you. And so you have that influence over seeing where the money gets directed.
There are a number of specific issues in Hawaii now that are endangered because of specifically endangered because Senator Inouye has kind of been their patron for a long time. Examples would be the East-West Center. You mentioned the Saddle Road, yes, but not just the Saddle Road. A number of other transportation infrastructure initiatives that are partially funded right now. I mentioned the Native Hawaiian healthcare, education, community health centers. Waianae Coast Comprehensive Health Center. These kind of areas have been supported by his patronage for a long, long time, and those are the areas that I think there's risk at right now.
The Native Hawaiian one is really an interesting one because, in a sense, it's unique. Even our friends in Washington don't know very. I mean, it's always up to the delegation. I think he worked very hard to try to get the Native Hawaiian organizations to build better networks among themselves, which is another way of saying get along better, but also to build the networks there. There was, and the Oha people talked about this in one of the eulogies.
Can I just add one thing that's important to say, and that is one of the things that Senator Inouye did right, is that people, discuss earmarks in the context of Senator Inouye, but one thing he was trying to do throughout his career was to institutionalize these programs and get them over into the executive budget as ongoing programs and efforts of the federal government that come out of the president's budget. Not that you have to add the money in Congress. And he was very, very successful in doing that. So there are a number of areas in Hawaii that are going to benefit for a long time, even though he's not there to earmark them every single year.
Well, what did you think of these committees that they got? Schatz got on commerce and Indian Affairs, which deals with Hawaii issues. Commerce deals with transportation and maritime issues, I believe. Mazie Hirono got on armed services. We have nobody on appropriations, but that may come down the road. Are those good committees?
Yeah, I think so. And I think Brian also was on energy, right? It's energy.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
Yeah, and our energy future is critical in terms of what's going to happen. And I think ultimately we need to have big influence in terms of what direction we're going to be going, because as we just saw with the closure or announcement of closure of Tesoro, we need to start choosing a different destiny when it comes to our energy future, and having somebody as a federal partner will be a big help in that.
And this goes, I'm sorry, I was just going to compliment something that Ed said. This goes back to what Ed said. If you lack seniority, the way to make a positive difference for your state is to be the area expert and to have jurisdiction over matters that ultimately will also dictate your state's future.
I think Senator Schatz had the best committee assignments of any of the four of them. He got two great committee assignments, well, three really, and they're great because not only are they issues where he can exert national leadership in areas that he's interested in, but because they have direct relevance to Hawaii on a broad scale. Congresswoman Hanabusa has good committees as well from that perspective, armed services and,
She has armed services
and natural resources.
And natural resources, right.
I was a little puzzled by Senator Hirono's committee assignments, in all honesty. They're good for very specific segments of Hawaii.
You're talking about Gabbard.
No, I'm talking about Senator. Did I say Congresswoman? I meant Senator Hirono. Armed Services is a good committee, but the problem there is that what you don't want to do is kind of overlap them so that the House and the Senate have the same committee. You want to spread it around for a small state, so it's a little problematic that, we've got Hanabusa with her principal committee, Armed Services, and Hirono. That's kind of like overkill. And that leaves other areas that are a little exposed, like education, healthcare. Veterans is very good for Senator Hirono because we have 100,000 veterans here in Hawaii. But it's a very narrow and specific issue area. Congresswoman Gabbard, Foreign Affairs and Homeland Security are areas where she can exert national leadership, but it's going to be a problem to convert those into specific benefit for Hawaii. So I'm hoping that over time she'll find some committees that are of benefit specifically for Hawaii.
The Indian Affairs one is interesting for one of the reasons that you mentioned, which is that it has jurisdiction over Native Hawaiian issues. It also keeps us, the delegation, in contact on a regular basis with the Alaska delegation, the Alaska senators, and that was an important thing. And if you notice, I think Alaska now has 2 senators on the Appropriations Committee, so that doesn't hurt either. And the initial evidence from Alaska after the death of Ted Stevens, who of course was a big man on the Republican side on appropriations, is that it didn't hurt Alaska that much. That it's still a little early to tell, but that on Native issues and on military issues, they really stayed pretty well cushioned from a very bad impact from the loss of Ted Stevens. So maybe that ties together in a nice way.
Well, that was but again, I mean, that was a very unusual situation where they rolled from approach to approach.
Yes,
I mean,
it's
going to be a while before Hirono or Schatz are going to end up in approach.
Oh no, for sure. This at best it keeps us in contact. Oh yeah, they did very well. Alaska did very well. Yeah.
How steep is the learning curve? If you were up there as a freshman in Congress, and then after your second term, you decided to go for the Senate. But how fast is your learning curve? If you had your, I know you wanted to be a United States Senator, but let's just say that if you were going to stay in the House, when do you think you would have become the most effective? How long would it take?
The House is much more a creature of time served to be effective because there's so many of the people there. The Senate depends a little bit more on individual ability and commitment and leadership skills because, again, in the Senate, you need to be a national leader from the get-go. If you're not, it's a waste. In the House, nobody expects you to, lead the country in this particular area for a while. So, I think that you. The first term in the House is a little bit feeling your way and developing those relationships and solidifying your knowledge base and working your committees and developing the relationships in the administration. I think by the second or third term, you better be kicking in. Otherwise, get out and let somebody else do the job, in all honesty.
What is the panel's opinion? I think we've answered that. Brian Schatz's chances of being reelected to the Senate when his present term is POW. You think some of this has got to do with whether he can garner the kind of money and campaign that is necessary?
I think he can. I'm not the best one to ask for predictions right now since I said that Colleen Hanabusa was a done deal. At least I admit it publicly that I said that. But I think he's really got a huge advantage here.
I said an hour after the death of the senator that I thought there was a very, very good chance that Brian Schatz was going to be appointed. So I was ahead of you. What do you think?
For Senator Schatz?
Yeah.
if anyone knows Brian, and I know him pretty well, having served time in the House with him, and Ed has as well, Brian is a political creature. He will do very, very well on Capitol Hill. He will excel, and so I am very comfortable that he will do whatever he needs to do to win in 2014. He is very, very smart, very, very sharp, and is extremely hardworking. And so I have full faith in him winning in 2014.
But he may be coming back to face, let's say, Iona, who's been on the ticket, who did reasonably well against Neil Abercrombie. Not great, but reasonably well. I'll be kind and say reasonably well. And Barack Obama will not be at the top of the ticket. Still.
Knowing Brian, I still have no qualms and questions about his ability.
I think incumbency in any situation is a huge advantage, particularly if the incumbent is smart and talented. But I think it depends who chooses to run against him, whether it's within the Democratic Party or whatnot.
Biggest issue in the House this session? State House.
In the State House?
Yes.
Biggest issue.
What will it be?
I think it ultimately will come down to the budget and how we're going to balance it.
The PLDC and unfunded liabilities.
In Congress?
Fiscal cliff.
Fiscal cliff.
Fiscal cliff.
And that's it for tonight. Thanks very much, you guys. I really appreciate it. It's a fascinating topic, and we'll be talking about it for the next 2 years. Next week, we'll talk about mental health in Hawaii. The tragic shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut nearly a month ago instantly revived the gun control debate. It also highlighted the need for better mental health programs and more awareness of the issue. On the next Insights, we'll take stock of Hawaii's mental health system. A week later, we'll revisit our state's gun control laws. That's next time on Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Dan Boylan. A hui ho.